The Lost Signals present
Children of the Night.
a celebration of universal horror
One more picture, then we will dig it out.
and another Halloween sequel
They'll survive its memory.
with in-depth analysis,
Now I know what it feels like to be God.
adult content,
The drugs I took seemed to light up my brain.
adult language,
You have to open graves, find girls to fall in love with.
and spoilers.
Bela became a wolf, and you killed him.
Join us.
Hello, and welcome back to this year's 2018's MOTS-O-Ween. Ooh, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Many
As,
months away still.
I'm creeping people out just like Dracula did in this movie. So, based on that, we are going to be discussing the original Dracula.
1931.
I believe it was 1931. Yes,
Yep.
There you go. Starring Bela Lugosi. And tonight, I am your host, Steve Ramosi.
Just for tonight, though.
Some other time, I might not be your host, Steve Ramosi. You'll find out. Joined by Jonathan Mazer
So terrifying.
and Scott Thurlow.
Children of the Night.
Indeed. So let's start off by giving this the old log line.
Okay, well, I've come up with Dracula, undead monster, or just creepy pervert. You decide.
It's a pretty good one. I like it. All right. Well, that being said, why don't we jump right into the plot with Ian?
You know the plot of Dracula. So I'm going to describe how this movie interprets it. A London real estate agent goes to Transylvania to meet Count Dracula, who is a creepy sex assaulter.
So it seems. Often.
Renfield gets assaulted and falls in love with his assaulter and becomes a stage 5 clinger. They arrive in London, where Freud has to lead a ragtag group to stop
To catch
Dracula.
To catch a Dracula. Damn it.
To catch a
I should have
Dracula.
gone with that one. Well, anyway, that's a good plot synopsis, too.
That's the plot of this film.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
true.
that's pretty apt, I would say. That being said, funny plots aside, it's been a solid plot that's been used in many things since then, and I think it does a good job. I'm probably going to give it a good score. I'm not sure if it's going to be a 3 or a 2 quite yet, but
I'm looking at it, too. Like, yeah, it's damn solid. That's the plot of Dracula. Dracula comes and starts doing Dracula things, and Helsing and company have to stop him, and it's perfectly fine. So, yeah, like, yes, it's a template that obviously you've seen many times since, and it even uses one that existed beforehand, but I think they followed it and pulled it off pretty well. Go on.
I don't want to be the guy who says, well, in the original
Right.
story. But here's the thing: is they're following a lot of the plot points from the original, and Bram Stoker's original work was a discussion of economics and like old
Classes and
money
stuff,
from
yeah.
Eastern Europe coming into London and buying up real estate and all of that. This takes
If only
a lot
Renfield
of
were here,
those-
could eat that fly, sorry.
I'm gonna eat this goddamn fly by the end of this.
We gotta
podcast.
find the
But-
studio. Go on.
But the thing is, so it does a lot of the trappings of the original.
Yeah.
Some it handles well. Some they decide to create their own thing off of, which we'll discuss in themes.
Mm.
But occasionally there are plot threads that lead to nowhere, or characters that
It's kind of meandering, or can be at points.
are sharing dual roles.
Mm.
So I don't think it's necessarily because they're on that line and they're trying to straddle that, and not quite. It doesn't come off quite as well. I'm going to give it a 2, but
Yeah.
I think it's solid enough.
I'm pretty much in that same camp, so that's probably what I'm going to do. Give it a 2.
What happens to Lucy, man? What
What about the
happens
mouse?
to Lucy?
What about the Lucy?
Well, yeah, that's exactly.
That's what
actually,
he's saying, though.
Dead and Loving It actually dealt with it,
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
which this didn't particularly.
No, I think I agree. I think I'm going to give it a 2 as well
Okay.
for plot. It's good, but it's not 3 material.
Yeah, it's not like perfect throughout, so.
All right. Well, unless anybody else has anything to say about plot, let's move on to themes. And Scott, why don't you tell us about the themes?
Always do what villagers in Transylvania tell you and warn you about Dracula. Like, I don't know, man. Like, on the surface, there's maybe something there, but I've been find myself saying this sort of recently, perhaps to a number of things, but like, is it the point of this film to have a theme? Like, maybe you guys will throw something at me, but initially I'm sort of looking at like a default zero. It's not like, again, completely absent, but it's more just a monster tale. It's a classic monster movie, or one of the earliest ones. You know, that's sort of formulated again our images of the classic monster, specifically Dracula. So I don't know if there's quite a lot there, but I'll throw it over to you guys. What do you think?
Well, it seems like the beginning of what will become a theme within horror in America.
Okay.
It seems to be looking at sexuality as a negative thing.
Yeah, like I kind of see that.
Mina,
but...
I think the scene with Mina when she turns and is trying to seduce her
and John.
beau. Yeah, John. It comes across as like this is an improper thing for behavior. Count Dracula, Bela Lugosi with his like stare and his rapey behavior.
Yes.
I think a little bit that's what they're going for. Which again,
yeah, you're right. That is in the film, sure.
I prefer my economics to my sexual
your
themes,
social taboos.
but I think that it was there, and maybe that's it.
You're right, it was, but like to me, I guess, was it enough? Like, are they really saying a lot with that, or just sort of like there because it's a sign of like the social stigmas of the times? You know what I mean?
Can you see any of that discussion of economics in this movie? I don't think you really can.
I do not. I think they sort of
just
stripped
like
it away.
completely stripped all that out, right?
Trappings were there, but it lost,
but not
its
much.
meaning.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of looking at a solid zero.
There's perhaps something. Well, not even that. I was gonna say something like maybe about science versus superstition in there, which it does get touched on
briefly. But,
I mean, it does. It's there, but they don't seem to say much about it, right?
Right. Yeah.
Except for maybe in that one scene where he's like, if you, I forget what Van Helsing is saying, but he's like says something like, you know, if we pay close enough attention, you'll see superstition turn into like scientific.
Yeah, you're right. He does say that line. Sure.
But there's aside from John, no one's really skeptical of it. His fellow doctor, Seward, is, even though it's his daughter at risk,
he basically.
Absolutely, it's vampires.
He defers.
Yeah, he
defers
buys
directly
right into it.
to Helsing. He's like, "Oh, of course, you're right. It must be that." So more or less, but so yeah, like
it could just been a creepy Eastern European guy moved in next door and tried to seduce your wife. That's actually a more plausible.
Might have been more interesting if that had been the case.
It's actually both. He is both a vampire and a creepy Eastern European man. So like, but for themes, I'm probably, like I said, looking at like a solid zero. Like, there's not enough there. They're not really. It's not really, again, like the point of it. And like you said, whatever the original like discussion about class and economics and so forth, like, was really stripped away. So
yeah, I mean, that's definitely the case. I think I might agree with a zero. Maybe like a softer zero, perhaps, but like, yeah,
I feel you.
I want to give this movie a 1 on themes, but I don't know if I actually can.
I don't think on our scale it's going to earn 1 for me, at least.
I actually agree. I was coming in going to give this a 1, but I think you guys convinced me.
Yeah. All right.
Well, it's going to go to antagonist for me, and I do like Bela Lugosi in this movie as Dracula, as the main antagonist, and you know, it's kind of the definition of a concrete antagonist, right? Like, a lot of times we talk about like society is an antagonist. Nope, it's definitely Dracula.
Vampires.
But he does a good job. Like, he's creepy and fucking weird and just like off-putting for the most part throughout the movie, and he's always like ever present, like just a bat outside your goddamn window most of the movie. Like, a lot of the movie, we're like, oh, we thought he had run away as a wolf. 3 seconds later, he's there as a bat.
He did both.
Giving orders too.
Yeah,
mind controlling people.
Mind controlling people. Yeah.
Well, I was gonna almost say that he's the protagonist because you start off with him. Like, the film basically starts with his story, but of course, like, he's antagonizing the family and Mina and Helsing and so forth. So yeah, like, it's, again, this is the classic, like, sort of what many people will have as an image of Dracula as portrayed by Bela Lugosi, and yeah, it still stands. It's still pretty damn good. Like, that's the shots. There's maybe a little bit style, But the fact that the film cuts to like him in shadow and like just giving like a 1,000-yard stare when he's doing his vampire thing, yeah, it's pretty solid. And certainly he lived up to the role of it.
I have nothing more to add to that. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's gonna be ones all around for antagonist, and let's move on to protagonist. Ian.
I have to say Renfeld.
I was almost gonna say that too.
Well, he's the one you follow.
He's the one you actually do start with, as you just mentioned. Yeah.
That's fair.
And
that's fair.
Until the very end of the film, he's the one you're with. He's in almost every scene, and they'll be having conversations, and all of a sudden he'll laugh.
That's what I was going to point out. They'll be like discussing theories of the vampires, and they'll be like, like coming out of the back room or something. Yeah, that's true.
Beyond that, I would say Van Helsing, but that's weird because he plays the role of the wise person who's supposed to be leading.
He's sort of like both,
but he's not leading anyone. John is a fool.
Yeah.
Dr. Seward is
led by Helsing, I would say.
His second,
so he's leading him at least.
And Mina and Lucy are both the victims here.
Yeah.
So I would say that maybe a combination of Renfeld and Van Helsing.
I was going to go with something like that, maybe. Certainly I was going to put Renfield as the standout secondary character, but I think you could sort of convince me there that we can give him, cut him up, give him half credit on each. Because I do think Van Helsing is the protagonist of that little group. Even though you're right, it's not perhaps he's not the monster hunter that you might know of, but he's the most knowledgeable. He's telling them what to do and how to fight Dracula.
And doing his best
and how to protect.
Impersonation.
Yeah, yes, exactly. So yeah, I think there's enough there on both fronts to give him collectively a 1.
Actually, I think Renfield is strongly in the protagonist category in this. You start off with him.
Fair enough.
You follow him throughout. He's the lens that we see this movie through.
Yeah, that's
pretty
true.
much. And I think that, honestly, I think that guy, I don't even know his name, but that guy was a standout actor in this fucking movie.
Sure.
I loved every time he was on screen. There were a couple times where he gave fairly long speeches, and it was almost the only time in this film that I was actually entranced by the acting and really into. I wanted to hear. I hung on every word that he had to say.
So there's an argument that Golem is a main protagonist in Lord of the Rings, and I think that if you buy into that, Renfeld certainly has a deeper arc than Golem does with being.
He has more characterization
by the darkness, and so I think he perhaps he, aside from Bela Lugosi, has the
most
best arc in this.
Yeah,
I mean, you're right. You guys make a stronger point than originally I was coming in with, but I'm still going to go with a 1 for sure. And you're right. I did like the portrayal of Renfield and the actor himself as the character as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that, and I'm going to give it a 1 for him. I didn't mention this when I was speaking earlier, but I think I would throw Van Helsing into the protagonist category as well.
Yeah, I feel you.
That's pretty strongly there, and he does a good job too. Honestly, those two were the two characters with the most
pathos,
emotional
perhaps.
range.
Yes.
I want to say, in terms of characters, and I really like what they did with both those characters in the movie.
Yep, I agree.
So let's talk about supporting characters, Scott.
So in that case, I guess we'll have to go with basically Mina, Lucy. I suppose John gets lumped in there as well. So that's fine. They're all fine.
Stewart.
You're right. Yeah, Stewart, actually, he was probably... So if we're going to call those, since we've already used up, if you will, we've given protagonist duties to Renfield and Van Helsing, so that's everyone who's left. So amongst those, probably Stewart's probably, I think, the best one of them.
Random townsfolk, I suppose.
Well, yeah, I was going to point that out too, but go ahead. What do you think?
Well, actually, I think Mina had an interesting, especially for considering it's the 1930s, the fact that she went from... Because she went from a socialite to a victim to the kind of almost for briefly a femme fatale
to the vamp,
character.
if you will. Yeah.
And I thought her range was fairly well done.
No, you're right. They
there.
did give her a pretty solid arc and characterization as it went on, so that's true.
But Cockney Guard?
Well, that's right. Oh, governor, you got vampires in your mansion. He was sort of I don't know if it was intended, but certainly comedic relief for us.
I think it was.
So you're right. I almost forgot about him. That's a good call. So I think they collectively will get a 1 probably from me. But you're right. Mina actually has more depth to her than I sort of originally was giving her credit for. So in that sense, I think again they all collectively will get a pretty solid one on that front.
Yeah, I agree. Mina had the one scene where like she is just staring intently at John like she wants to fucking eat him, and which she does in the movie, and like that actress, I don't know her name. I know no one's name except for Bela Lugosi. We'll say that right now.
We're not saying
that actress portrayed that so well in that scene. I thought it was really good. And
no, you're right. It was a good part.
She had a better stare than Lugosi.
Than Bela himself, perhaps. He had a pretty good one
at
too.
least at that moment, sure.
But yeah, I mean, I think she did a good job. Stewart was good. John was honestly, if it was
the weakest.
Just John, I was basing this on, I would give it a 0.
No, I agree. He was certainly the weakest of that.
But yeah, like I thought that the supporting characters are pretty good. Every time I haven't seen this movie in a long time, but like it reminded me of the episode of Futurama where they go to. It's basically like the beginning of it is basically
the howling.
Dracula. Yeah, it's like, oh, we're just poor idiot village people, whatever. And like that beginning scene always reminds me of that.
Yeah, sure. That is funny.
But anyway, I think we're all gonna give this a 1.
Yep.
And let's move on to dialogue. That's gonna be me. So I enjoy the dialogue of this movie. I'm probably going to give it a 1. There are a couple parts that are really... Actually, I think I have to give it a 1 for the one part that we all remarked on, which I'm not even going to say. I know you guys know what I'm talking about. I'll let one of you say it. But other than that, I think that the dialogue is solid, not amazing, but probably good enough for a 1 from me.
I was somewhat iffy on it because you're right. Like, it is solid. It's fine. But a lot of times, like, again, because of the nature of it and, like...
Yeah, the problem is it's from...
1931,
80 years ago.
I get it, and maybe it's just also style, but there's a lot of exposition, but there has to be. Like, I understand why it's there. It's just that sometimes, maybe again, because of the time gap, it feels a little bit
Also,
stilted.
we're aware of what vampires are nowadays.
Right,
yeah.
I'm not sure how prominent it was back then.
And that's true. Like, so it's like, I'll cut it some slack on that front. And like, yeah, for the most part, yes. And there's like the famous like the Children of the Night, such music they make. Like that still is pretty effective. I still liked it, even though like you've seen that and seen it parodied so many times since. It still, as it originally is in the film, is a good scene and a good little line to have. So yeah, everything else is. I'll leave the line there. Were actually another one for you in a second. But I just was somewhat more wavering it coming into it. But I think overall, if I do like a mathematical split, as I sometimes do, like 60-40 ish, something like that, on the one side. So, goody.
Well, as of this moment, I'm not sure what you're referring to, but I'm going to say this, that we have precedent for dialogue, using this for dialogue. The use of silence in this was done very well.
Yeah, that's true. I was going to put that in style, but you're right.
But so I'm going to include that in the assessment of the dialogue, which is the use of not using dialogue. So what was the line you're talking about?
I thought it was on who could be the vampire or whatever.
Yeah.
And then he shows
And then
up
somebody says Dracula, and then he's like, yes, I'm being introduced now.
Yeah.
But actually, I do want to mention one other part that I'll probably put it more strongly into the one camp for me, which is Renfield's speech where he's talking about the red mist, parting the red mist.
Yeah,
and
that
like
was
that
cool.
whole thing. It was so well done. Like I will certainly give a lot of that to his performance, but the actual
line
script of that, like that actual script of that part was fucking awesome as well. So very gothic and like dark, very cool.
Cool imagery. Yeah.
Imagery. Yeah.
No, you're right. I agree. So, like I said, I'm leaning towards maybe a softer-ish one, but still certainly a 1 at the end of the day because it was perfectly fine throughout, even though if it's by our standards today, like it might have felt a little dated.
Absolutely. All right. So that's 1s all around for dialogue, and let's go on to style. Ian.
So I'm not going to punish this for being an older movie. Certainly there's some bad special effects in this, but there's some... I love a good matte painting. I love a good use of models.
Yeah.
They do that well here. Some of the sets are fantastic.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
And have been used in films much later than this original... So I think overall, the style holds up pretty well. The wolves howling in the distance, especially a couple times, a almost meta-narratively, like winking at you.
Yeah.
Overall, I think stylistically it's fine. Yeah, a little dated, but I'm not going to hold it against it.
Yeah, like sure. Aside from like the obviously fake bats, like whatever. But I think like again the shots, and I was saying the use of because it's in black and white, of course, the use of shadowing, like when it's on Bella's face or like just in certain rooms and so forth, like that was all very well done. And yeah, like you can tell when they're like the models and whatever, but it still looks fine. It still holds together fine. Some of the shots and some of the sets, like you said, are even though they're recognizable, they work really well for this, and it's very classic imagery. So I think it holds up very nicely.
Yeah, this film does a really good job with style, and I'm sure it was amazing, when it came out in terms of that. Some of the
sure. I'm sure people were very impressed with it. Yeah,
the set for the crypt was really cool, and like like even today, those are cool sets. You have to go into a movie from 1931 knowing what you're getting into. Like it's not like they're gonna have like CGI bats and shit, but for what it was, for what they had to work with, I think it looked really impressive, and it did a good job, as you mentioned earlier, with the sound design, the silence. Unfortunately, there's one thing that we did notice that I mentioned. It was like there's just like white noise throughout,
it's
and
just an artifact of the equipment they had.
I don't know exactly what if that was originally on the sound, or if that's like an artifact from something that's like been recovered from the 1930s or whatever, but.
I mean, it's
definitely noticeable.
It wasn't too
at
distracting,
first, but
though.
it's not too bad. You get used to it after a while. So
yeah, I actually didn't notice it. I mean, after we pointed it out, and then I sort of forgot about it after that because it didn't like intrude upon anything. But everything else you said, like you said, the use of silence and to me the use of shadows and silence, I guess combined, is some of the standouts for the style.
And and some of the fades that they do, like into the shadows and things like that. Those are things that were used extensively, like techniques that were used extensively after that, and to some extent still used or at least referenced.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm sorry, am I boring you?
What?
What? No, but I think that this film did a good job with the style, and I'm definitely gonna give it a 1 for that.
I agree.
I think that's 1s all around for style.
Yep.
And that brings us to recommendation, Scott.
So yeah, I suppose like it's still fine. We're gonna give it a pretty good score. It seems like, and yes. So we're doing this this year. We're doing this sort of the return to classic or the original, where many of these things came from. So I guess the question I was asking and sort of answered before is, does it hold up overall? Yeah, I think it does. I think yes, as we said, it's a little. You could seem a little bit dated, and that's going to be the case always for going back enough time for a movie like this. But nevertheless, I still think it is one of the classic monster movies. Everything about it, like I said, holds up. Bela Lugosi is still as captivating in that role, and you can see why. So I think it's still worth a watch, and I will recommend it.
Yeah.
I think this has only grown in relevance since the current climate. You have Bill Cosby, Harvey Weinstein, and Dracula. And I do recommend this. I think it holds up, and I think that I don't know, I like vampires and all that, but Dracula itself, they don't do it well very often.
That's a fair point. Yeah, that's true. Or at least I agree.
Aside from maybe Bram Stoker's, I can't think of another one that I would say.
Dead and Loving It.
That's just a parody, though, of this.
I like Dracula 2000 or whatever. I don't.
No, thank you.
So, yeah, this is still, I think, what people think of when they.
Yeah, it's like the classic imagery and like the classic, its iconic status still holds up. I think so.
Yeah, I agree. This is a film that was iconic and is iconic for a reason. You still have vampires, like perhaps jokingly at this point, but using the same mannerisms that Bela Lugosi used in 1931. He
sort of codified that.
Yeah, invented like the cape of like that little move and like all that stuff. And as far as all that goes, if you want to see what started the whole thing, it's worth a watch. It's around Halloween time, right? I mean, it's not now for us, but it will be.
Through the
when
magic
you see
of television,
this.
it will be.
Yeah.
When this airs.
just go check it out. It's a fun, campy movie. Watch it with a bunch of friends and just like make a drinking game out of it or something. It's a blast. So like
every time Renfield
Yeah.
shows up,
every time Renfield tries to eat an insect. But yeah, it's a good time. Just give it a shot, and I definitely recommend it.
Yeah.
So
I feel you. So what do we got?
that is going to give us all 8s for scores.
Okay.
Which gives us an aggregate score of an 8. And
I think that's perfectly valid. Like, it's still damn good, like we said. Damn stout overall, and it holds up on a lot of points on our scale. So yeah, still worth it. Still classic Dracula. Still loving it.
yeah, I mean, I agree. So, anybody else have anything else to say about Dracula?
Nope. Some of us will never sleep again. That's all I gotta say.
I've been your host, Stephen Ramosi, here with Jonathan Eamezer
alive and hating it.
and Scott Thurlow.
See you next time. Try not to get bitten.
Editing and engineering by Christopher Morgan. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates.